There is talk that U.S. President Joe Biden may be sending more U.S. taxpayers' funds to a group that allegedly promotes hate against Israel. To talk about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, who joins us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, the Gatestone Institute says Biden is giving more funding to the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees. It's a group that in the past allegedly had school books that incites violence against Israel?
Yeah, nothing new, nothing new. The Palestinians have a certain way of milking the system for more funding, but not changing their ways. And that's the issue here. Look, this is not the first president that has given funding to the Palestinians through UNRWA. UNRWA, as you said, is the UN agency that is designated just to help Palestinians. And of course, we've been giving funding to them, but again, they've been shielding, using children as shields, putting weapons in their schools. Their textbooks talk about, killing 2 Jews today and 2 tomorrow. How many have I killed in total? You have videos of young children with these slogans at school talking about killing Jews, but they're so young, they shouldn't even be talking about that kind of violence at such a young age. And the question here is not about the funding. It's about why we're not ever using our aid here in the United States for any leverage to make any changes. If you want to give the money to the Palestinians, if you think that they are a deserving people of the funding, they're in need, well, then use that leverage and say, well, I want to see those textbooks changed. I want to see the rhetoric changed. If we hear you saying or inciting this kind of hate, teaching the children this kind of garbage, well, then we're going to cut your aid. And that's the only way we're going to have a generational difference going forward. And if not, you're going to have these children to grow up to be shaheeds, martyrs, suicide bombers, growing up with this hatred of a people that live only miles from their borders. And that, that's the reason we talk about this. President Trump was the only president who said, enough is enough, and he cut the funding. Now, President Biden came into office, and it was within the first week when he did a 180 on so many of President Trump's policies, including giving funding to the Palestinians, again, without any leverage, without any slap on the wrist that says, if you want this, you have to do this. It's like giving allowance to a child. You got to take out the garbage, you get your allowance. And it's just not done in this kind of administration. So they just want to give out the money. They don't talk about getting anything in return. America's bad. We're the guilty ones. We're the bad ones. And here's your money. You can continue inciting hate and going on status quo.
So has Israel actually called out the Biden administration on this move?
Well, Israel tiptoes around the Biden administration. Israel, obviously, under Bibi Netanyahu, had a wonderful, beautiful, probably the best relationship they ever had with the U.S. president under President Trump, right? So they moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Many U.S. presidents had promised to do so, but chickened out at the last minute. We had, the Abraham Accords, of course, bringing so much, trade and prosperity to the Arab states as well as to Israel, making it obviously much more safe, secure, and prosperous for Israel and its neighbors. But, the Biden administration, it's been kind of like a cold friendship, but a friendship nonetheless. So they haven't gone back to the Obama frigid relationship that President Obama and Bibi Netanyahu had at the time. They said that was more of a personal thing, not so much about Israel and the U.S., but it obviously affected the relationship between the U.S. and Israel at that time. And now Israel kind of, has to work around this. Obviously, they don't want to disrupt their own relationship with the United States, but they have to be weary. They watch this terrorism be funded by their friends, the United States. So it's crazy to watch this circle of violence in the Middle East and to see that the United States is complicit in that circle of violence.
Now, Lisa, speaking of terrorism, the Israeli Navy sank a Palestinian fishing vessel that was allegedly smuggling equipment to support Hamas terrorists in Gaza on Sunday. Now, apparently, crew aboard the boat ignored multiple calls and commands to stop from the Israeli Navy.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head. They got warnings to say stop. It's almost like a police stop. Let me check your trunk. And if you start running from the police, that's when a chase ensues, and they know that you're guilty of carrying whatever it is, drugs in your car, whatever it is. They knew that this fishing boat, so to speak, was carrying tons of weapons to get to Hamas, and they have to do, they'd rather stop it there than to have to kind of catch it in the Iron Dome, stop the missiles, stop the weaponry, stop the guns there, and not let it get to Hamas hands. But it's horrific. The mainstream media misses these stories. It doesn't behoove them to cover these stories. Once these weapons land in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem and other places, and then Israel is forced to retaliate, to defend itself, then you hear the mainstream media begin to cover this story. But these are the initial parts of the story that everyone seems to ignore.
Passengers on board a Saturday flight from Israel to Poland were ordered to carry out an emergency evacuation due to fears of a bomb on board the aircraft, Lisa.
Yes, this airline this is the second bomb scare that they have had in recent weeks. This was going from Ben Gurion Airport in Israel to Poland. It did land at about 10:30 p.m. Then when they did land, they were ordered to go to a different part of the tarmac, and the passengers were then coming off of chutes, of slides, to get out of the plane. But thankfully, nobody was hurt. But again, it kind of begs the question, why are these threats happening? Who's making the threats? And in fact, if one can potentially get through, if they were that scared when they were landing, how credible is the threat? And again, what's next, right? I mean, how do we keep these airlines safe? Obviously, a lot of bad actors out there, and a lot of flights, and already we're having issues with canceled flights and keeping everyone secure and safe. And of course, it's not COVID now. Now we're back to terrorism. So never a dull moment.
Let's make our way over to Iran for just a moment here, Lisa. There's word that a senior Iranian missile engineer may have been killed in the southern part of Iran over the weekend. There are some reports saying that he was actually assassinated. Tell me more.
Right. So this is a trend nowadays. If we've been following the assassination, we call them assassination because they are officials, but really the murder of high up officials in Iran's nuclear program. So in the past, when these assassinations would occur, Israel was not formally taking responsibility. For the first time, about a month ago, we had a breaking report that Israel was now saying, yep, that was us. And this was when one of the other senior officials of the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard, which is a paramilitary arm of the Iranian regime, was taken out in front of his house by a round of bullets as he was trying to get into his car. Again, the Iran regime blamed Israel. Israel would usually deny, but in this case, they actually said, yes, it was us. This is because, and why are we seeing the shift? That's because we are having an open proxy war between Israel and the Iranian regime. When Iran threatens to take Israel off the map and continues building its weapons program, enriching uranium at over 60%, shutting off the IAEA, the atomic energy cameras, and not allowing any surveillance of its programs, and threatening, frankly, to have a bomb, well, then Israel has to, again, curtail this, in its infancy as much as it can. So Israel has been targeting their weapons depots, has been targeting their experts, in this case, as you see, and targeting them in Syria, in a place where they exist outside of their own borders. And of course, the Iranian regime would prefer to keep it outside their borders. But again, another piece of this proxy war that we're seeing between the two.
Lisa, you and I have chatted in the past about these massive caravans, so many thousands of people leaving Southern and Central America, making their way to Mexico and the United States. There's word now that the Biden administration is considering issuing government ID cards to border crossers and illegal aliens who are set for release into various communities in the United States. It's all part of the government's catch and release operation.
Yeah, I mean, really no words. This is part of the Department of Homeland Security. Again, Homeland Security, catch and release. I mean, how secure does that sound if you're the Department of Homeland Security? So what happens is that they have a process of basically don't ask, don't tell. You capture some of these immigrants that come through the border, and then they are released. Now, not only will they be released, they will also be given ID cards. This is a proposal by the Biden administration to give them ID cards cards, we know what's coming next. They will be able to vote. And we know how they will vote because of whomever gave them the ID cards and whomever gave them the ability and whomever said we will have these lax policies at the border. So it is all probably in a process of getting, everyone kind of absorbed into society. Now, a funny little caveat to this story is that the governor of Texas has been busing many of these migrants to Washington, D.C. And the reason he's doing so is saying, look, if you're the Biden administration and you're saying it's wonderful to have so many illegal immigrants pour into your cities, well, then literally we will give you that wish. And taking them from Texas, where they obviously cannot be absorbed in these numbers, to Washington. And of course, there is been outcry and everyone's upset about it. So, it's easy to deliver the lip service. It's easy to pretend that this is a humanitarian service when it's not. When so many people die making this trip, when their children sent alone because it behooves them, they incentivize children coming on their own because they cannot be sent back if it's not an adjacent country, meaning if they're not from Canada or Mexico, children cannot be sent back. And we saw the 53 that died in that tractor trailer just a few weeks ago. So if you are making the humanitarian argument for this, you're absolutely wrong. This is not something that's humanitarian. What is humanitarian is having a proper immigration process where people can come in, they can be vetted so that both on this side of the border and on that side of the border, everyone is safer. In Mexico, they're upset. They just pledged $1.5 billion to the Biden administration to help us with our immigration crisis because they don't want to deal with the fallout. Northern Mexico is filled with these camps of illegals because they are either waiting or they're being sent back. And for that reason, Mexico is fed up. So no one's winning here. That's the bottom line.
Lisa, there's talk here in Canada about potential COVID-19 mandates being brought back this fall. Now, in the United States, a number of Democratic states are bringing back school masks, and parent advocacy groups are fighting back.
Yes. So I actually was able to interview Sharon McKeeman from Let Them Breathe. She is probably one of the foremost, if not the foremost, face of American parents fighting these mandates. She started the group Let Them Breathe in 2020 to fight the school closures and the mandatory masking here in the United States, based in Southern California. So she has fought so many different school districts and brought actual lawsuits against the governor of California and against these school districts, and she has been victorious in many of them. So as of last week, San Diego School District announced that they will go back to mandatory masking. And when they were pressed on the issue of children who have medical issues or cannot be masked, she said they can either go to a different school or Zoom from home, which, as we know, the data is not supporting this. A, the data is not supporting it for COVID in children, and B, the data for children Zooming or masking has not shown anything. So where are they getting their information from? I mean, this is completely arbitrary, but what we do know, the data that we do know, is that children are behind. They're 40 to 60% behind in math. The numbers is probably even lower in minority communities. They're 20% below where they should be in terms of physical activity. I mean, this is detrimental, particularly for the young kids who are learning how to speak and communicate, and their teachers' mouths are covered with masks. And again, here in Los Angeles, we have Barbara Ferrer, who is the county health supervisor. She is not a doctor. She has a PhD in social justice. It now comes out this week that her daughter, who is also not a doctor, is the one that she contracted to come up with a report that will now be used as the CDC guideline to mask people in Los Angeles. And we'll be either masking at the end of this week or it will be overturned. I'm not sure. A lot of people are fighting this, but they want to go back to indoor masking in Los Angeles, again, based on a bogus report from a non-doctor. Again, I'll add this. I know I'm going on very long on this one, but there was a leaked tape, and I really encourage all individuals who want to fight this to use this as evidence or as a good resource. There is a leaked tape from the physicians at LA County USC Hospital where they are discussing masking and going back to mandates. And they talk about how the patients who are being admitted to the hospital right now, only 10% of them are really COVID cases. The other ones are actually other issues that are on the periphery. And of those, almost none of them are getting intubated and almost none of them are dying. So when they use the evidence of LA hospitals are overflowing with COVID patients and the numbers are up, they actually called it a bad cold in this tape. So it's very interesting to watch the facts versus the made up facts and where they're pushing us towards this fall.
Lisa, we only have a couple of short moments left here, but I wanted to chat with you about a Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee has warned Americans not to use DNA testing services. Jason Crow says the information collected could create bioweapons targeting individuals or groups.
Yeah, so what they're suggesting is that you do not use these companies like 23andMe where they do genetic testing. You basically give a sample and you mail it to them and they give you all the things, all your chromosomal layout, what you could be allergic to and what you have, you're predisposed to, et cetera. What he's warning against is that these companies can sell your DNA and then use it against us as a society on how to target us. I mean, perhaps that's what's been done already, but this is what he is warning in terms of the future of warfare is this biochemical warfare, where it would be, specific parts of our DNA would be sold and therefore used against us. And he's saying, don't use these services. So I have heard this before, but this is more, in conjunction with biowarfare, not anything else. But I have heard that there may be very, very significant security breaches with these companies. So it's better not to use them.
U.S. political reporter and our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for your time today.
My pleasure.